Well, we are back again. This week I'm going to do something a little bit different. Well, it's not that different. We have done it before, but it's not something we do frequently, which is we are starting a new series. So this is going to be part one of a series of videos about sleep, because I'm reading this book called Why Sleep Matters by a guy called Matthew Walker, I think his name is. Oops, sorry. And so I don't know how many parts there's going to be, but this is going to be the first one. Well, we did a similar thing for the love languages earlier on in the channel, and I said I would do more series, but I'm about halfway through the book and I'm really enjoying it, and I've learned a whole number of things that I didn't know before, and I thought it was worthwhile sharing here because, as we all kind of can guess just from just how we've felt in the past, that sleep is a really important thing, and you can really negatively impact yourself if you're sleep deprived, because you just, well, when it comes to self-development in many respects, not only is there health benefits that can come from good sleep, and also health negatives if you don't get enough sleep, there's also like the kind of performance wise of you won't have the energy or motivation to do the things you need to do because, well, you just didn't get quite literally enough sleep. So video one, this part one, will be about a thing called the circadian rhythm and this sleep pressure chemical that builds up in your head over the course of the day called adenosine or adenosine. We'll figure out how to say it through the course of the video. And also just, some interactions between those two and some interesting things I thought, learnt about them on the way. So let's start off with the number one, which is the circadian rhythm. So that is a internal clock in your body which tells you whether or not you should be awake at that moment, or whether you should be or if you should be getting ready to go to bed. It in itself doesn't put you to bed, but it kind of gives you an indication of kind of when you should be up and when you should be going down to going to bed. It kind of gives you time zones. Well, it's like your own internal time zone, right? And we'll get to jet lag and stuff like that in a minute. But what's important to know about this is it is free from any other stimulus. So what I mean by that is you can be in pitch black for weeks, right? Like for days, for weeks. You will still have a consistent circadian rhythm of around about 16 to 18 hours awake with 6 to 8 hours asleep. So it can range a little bit depending on where you're at and stuff like that, but you tend to be usually in those ranges. And there was two scientists that did a study by going into this place called Mammoth Cave, which is, once you go down into it, like kilometers down into the Mammoth Cave, it's essentially pitch black. You can't see anything. And they ended up spending something like maybe like 30 or 40 days there, and they documented how many hours they were awake and how many they were asleep. And even without the interaction with the Earth's day-night cycle, they still kind of kept that consistent rhythm of wakefulness and going to bed as well. So the circadian rhythm is really important because it's that internal clock. And the interesting thing about it, especially when it comes to something like jet lag, is when we move westward. So if you go westward from where you currently are, it will be a little bit easier on your body, because essentially what you're asking your internal body clock to do is instead of having to go to bed when you normally would, you stay up for a little bit longer. You stay up for a couple hours longer, because you've essentially, by going westward, you've gone back in time, in theory. Not really, but in theory, when it comes to how the time zones work, you've gone back in time. So really, when it comes to your internal clock, it requires you to stay up a little bit later than you normally would and then go to bed. While if you're going eastward, what happens is you're requiring your circadian rhythm, or you're requiring your day to be shrunken down. So you're expecting to go to bed a lot earlier than you typically would, which, as you can imagine, becomes very difficult. And that's what people usually tend to describe as like jet lag, when they can't get to bed when they need to, or when they just feel usually shit from time zone differences and stuff like that. But it usually tends to result from being able landing in a new location, having one night of terrible sleep because they literally couldn't get to sleep because their circadian rhythm is telling them at that moment that, they're actually being meant to be awake regardless of what's actually going on outside. And I think that's really one of the big proofs that, the circadian rhythm is completely internal to you, is that you can go to a different time zone and it can be nighttime there, but your body can be adjusted to it's meant to be up and about, so it's going to do that regardless, and it doesn't care that the moon's out and everyone else has gone to bed. It doesn't matter. And another interesting fact is also it takes around about, your circadian rhythm can adjust for 1 hour a day. So if you move if you move to a time zone that's 7 hours, plus minus, it will take about a week before your body can actually fully adjust to that new time zone, as it slowly, just gravitates to recalibrating. Now the next part, and it's a little bit related to circadian rhythm, is this thing called adenosine, which is the sleep pressure molecule, which essentially builds up the longer you're awake. So as long as you're awake, this chemical is slowly building up in your brain. And, as you go, the way it's kind of meant to work is that, your circadian rhythm and your sleep pressure, builds up enough, or the circadian rhythm hits the point where you want to be starting to wind down for bed, right? Then your adenosine, which is the sleep pressure molecule, should be, high enough that it really, gets you tired, you're all drowsy, your head's starting to bob and stuff like that. And then that's when you go off to sleep. What happens while you're sleeping is your levels of adenosine slowly plummet down, or slowly go down as, you continue to sleep. And then when you wake up in the morning, you're at the lowest point of your adenosine levels again. And then from you staying up for the rest of that day, going about your life, it will then increase again till when late in the evening, you'll feel tired again, because both your circadian rhythm and your sleep pressure molecule are telling you to go to sleep. But an interesting interaction between the two is that they don't always work in tandem. They can also kind of work against one another, and depending for what purposes. If you're a university student, this can sometimes be a blessing, but they're not actually connected, these two things. They're completely independent, but sometimes it seems like they work together. So what I mean by that is, imagine you're doing an all-nighter and you're not going to bed. So you've got a whole day of your body, building up adenosine in the body, in your brain. So it should be trying to go to sleep. And then you kind of hit 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, around about that time at night on the first night. And it's telling you, your circadian rhythm's telling you it's time to go to bed. You've got a large amount of adenosine in your brain saying, putting pressure on you to kind of go to sleep. But if you, usually in those instances, someone will drink caffeine, or that's why you typically need caffeine to get through an all-nighter, is because what caffeine does is caffeine not neutralizes, but numbs the adenosine in your brain. It kind of suppresses it for a time. So that's normally what you see people chugging when they're doing they've got a university assignment due the next day, so they're going to pull an all-nighter to finish it, is they'll drink a bunch of energy drinks or caffeine, essentially, to suppress the adenosine, to keep them up. Now, the adenosine's going to keep building up as they're, awake, even though their circadian rhythm is normally telling them to be asleep, and the adenosine's continuing to build because they're staying up all night. They will kind of hit the dumps around about 2, 3 a.m. That'll be the kind of lowest point, at least for a time. And then what will happen is, once you kind of get to 8, 9 o'clock, the person will actually experience a second wind, because although the adenosine is still building up in their body because they haven't gone to sleep at all for the past, day and night, because they've, pulled this all-nighter, their circadian rhythm comes in the morning and actually saves them. It actually gives them this boost of energy and this second wind, because, like I said, the two systems don't actually talk to one another. They can seemingly work towards the same end, but they can also work to counter one another. Like I said, in this instance with the all-nighter, is that, the adenosine keeps building up as the day goes by, as the second day goes by. But because your circadian rhythm is there, it's pretty much saying that no, you should be up and awake. You should be up and awake. You're all fine. You don't need to. You don't need to worry about going to sleep. But the worst part happens the day after the all nighter, because you have that second wind throughout the second day because of your circadian rhythm. But then once you get to the second evening, you'll have 2 full days worth of adenosine built up, which is just gonna mean you're gonna get hit by a truck. And what that means is you'll also have to sleep for longer. So instead of having to sleep for about 7 to 8 hours, you'll have to sleep for more to 10 to 12, because you have that extra day's worth of adenosine that you didn't purge. And that's a huge problem, as you can imagine. If people are constantly living lives like that where they're not getting enough hours of sleep, so every single day they're progressively not fully purging the adenosine in their body, which means every day they wake up feeling tired again and again and again. And that is the reason why you will wake up tired, is because you haven't given your body enough time to actually remove that sleep pressure molecule. And then you can numb it, and pacify it for a time with caffeine. And then you see that throughout the world, so many people are addicted to coffee and other things like energy drinks and soft drinks and stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, I was very much a huge fan of soft drinks, but every day coming more to realize that these aren't good things for you. Caffeine is a cancer for the body, really, and it's not something you should be using. You should be able to have enough energy through sleeping and exercising that builds up your energy reserves to kind of get everything done that you need to. Because at the end of the day, those chemicals like caffeine, and they're essentially crutches, chemical crutches that actually do damage to you and impact things like your sleep, which is going to impact the rest of your life. So yeah, this is going to be the end of part 1. Got a whole number of other parts kind of almost ready to go, and we'll kind of, as the weeks go by, I'll drop them. But I don't have an end point. I don't know exactly how many parts this is going to be, just because I haven't finished the book yet. But I do definitely recommend picking up the book yourself. So yeah, watch these videos 100%. I'll give you as good of a rundown as I can, especially, and try and link it back to our overall mission for the channel here. But I still believe you should go out and read the book, because I've learnt a lot about the kind of sleep and sleep cycles and what all the things I've been doing wrong in that arena. And I think I don't think me on these videos will ever do it enough justice. So definitely give it a look, because I think sleep's super important, and I think you can understand why. So like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon.